What's up, man?
What's up, dude?
How are you?
Dude, I'm well. I'm happy to be out here in this beautiful space, man. This is super cool. Thank you for giving me your time to ask you some provoking questions.
Yeah. I'm honored, dude. I'm honored for sure.
All right, I'm gonna go right into it.
Okay.
In your chapter title, you refer to yourself as the muted black boy. That's powerful. At what point in your life did you feel that you finally found your voice, and how did rhythm help you speak when words couldn't?
I don't know if there's one point. I don't even know if I am able to identify. I think maybe there's one point that I can identify that happened. Maybe two. They're really close to one another. And I speak a lot about the place that this exists, which is Nacogdoches, Texas. But I love Nacogdoches, Texas, and it's where all of my evolution of transition from drummer and musician to therapist and educator evolved. And I say that because essentially I was in a life crisis to where I was like, I'm gonna have to figure out how to make money and live freely and be okay with all the things that may or may not happen. And so at some point I had in my head, nonprofit, I'm gonna start a nonprofit. And I started this thing off the back of the very intention of creating a space for music in a very dynamic that I had not lived in before, which was music for serving others versus music for serving me. Right? So I had, which is funny now, I had 3 hand drums, which you don't even know how many I have now, but you know you've seen at least like 8 of them.
Oh, I can only imagine. Yeah, I've seen them stacked up for the children's stuff that you do, and I was like, man, this dude made a tower. I'm like,
I did, and that was only 4 drums.
Yeah.
And it was little drums.
I was looking up on the ceiling, even through my phone. I was like,
I'll show you when we finish this interview. There's a closet with the majority of them in there. Not all, but a huge majority. So that was a huge turning point. And I think previous to that, I made the decision to live in Nacogdoches because truly that was a moment of separating myself from my mother's legacy. I love my mother. My legacy is my legacy. Her legacy is her legacy. And at some point, there has to be this intentional decision to completely own your own life and own your own craft and not let much of it be attached to your parents' legacy. Right? And so making the decision to move to Nacogdoches sucked for me at first because my mom has a few master's degrees that she got from SFA. And so I was always like, I'm not moving to Nacogdoches because I just don't want that. And secretly in my being, I just was like, no. And when I got employment in Lufkin, Texas, doing substance abuse work, right, I realized I didn't want to move to Lufkin, Texas. No disrespect to all my homies. In fact, I know a very awesome, stellar guy named Casey who lives in Lufkin, Texas, Mr. Sizemore. Shout out to Mr. Sizemore, Casey Sizemore, who still continues to do some really immaculate things in the whole deep East Texas scene, not only in Lufkin. But yeah, so those 2 moments, moving to Nacogdoches and having the crisis of, I gotta figure out how to live.
how much of, you talk about this independence and crafting your own legacy. I think a lot of the times when we're, especially artists, we get so honed into, I gotta make my craft individual, I gotta make it about me, and we neglect every other part of our life that we need to make about ourselves. What would you say is the most important thing to remember when cultivating a life and transitioning from the phase of, okay, I'm trying to build the legacy off of my back instead of somebody else's, and what are the appropriate steps to take?
I think prospectively looking at it as the journey and the progress for you individually, and not be so focused on the separation of your legacy versus others. I mean, I said that in all the truth and transparency in the world about separating myself from my mom's legacy, but in reality, it wasn't a big hindering thing
Right.
that I kept, that was just like a harboring thing,
Right.
because
some people have like the chip on their shoulder, and it doesn't sound like that's what
Yeah.
you're referring to at all. You know?
no, I think the bigger chip on my shoulder was creating a life of somebody who was respected with only an associate's degree. I think that was a chip for me.
Yeah.
And
I like how you say only, like that's not an accomplishment in and of itself.
well,
You
I
know what
say
mean?
that because that's how the world looks at an associate's degree, is you only have an associate's degree. Which, in reality, I'm not sure if the world looks at it like that now, because if you look at it, like if you look at the idea of people working Fortune 500 companies now, or like major marketing companies,
Yeah.
or law firm companies, you gotta have a law degree.
Right.
But any of those major companies that do work that don't have a credential thing that is required, half the time people that are employing them don't know now what is their education level, because it's not really a thing that's required or looked at as a mandatory pursuit.
Isn't it funny how like the standard of knowledge for a lot of people are the titles that they have? It's like, well, a doctor said this,
Sure.
therefore it makes it true.
Sure.
And we have billions of doctors saying billions of things.
Sure.
But they're a doctor.
Sure.
It's like, well, yeah. But I had an older gentleman who walked up to me the other day, and I was talking to him for a while, and he was a phenomenal human being. But he said something to me, and he didn't even ask if I went to school. He just said, "Why didn't you go to school, son?" And I said, because everything I want to do didn't necessarily require it.
Yeah.
But I love education.
Right.
You know, and I found it funny. It's like there's this culture that revolves around presumptions. Even when we say, like, in East Texas, like, where do you go to church?
Mm-hmm.
We don't ask people if they go to church. We say where. We go ahead and assume that they go in the first place, and it's like, is that because what are we trying to gain when we ask that? Are we just trying to see how they're going to respond, or what is I feel like the most genuine thing when building relationships with anybody is to probably not try to assume anything. And even if you're trying to assume the best in somebody, like, let them tell you. Don't put that on them. You know what I mean?
Also, have the understanding that people don't know how to do that because they were never taught. And in some places of the world, you're taught more eloquently how to do that. But I know currently, geographically, where we sit and where we stand, which is deep East Texas, well, not deep East Texas, but East Texas, but in deep East Texas, for the most part, we are not taught how to ask questions and enter a conversation without setting a precedence or a stage for assumptional expectation. So, yeah, there's that spirit.
That deserves to be a hashtag. Assumptional. What do you say? Assumptional
Expectation.
Expectation.
Yeah, that's wild.
So, in your chapter, you described a time when you were DJing in nightclubs while serving in a children's ministry, and you wrote that the exhaustion from this duality was eating away at your mental well-being. And what was the breaking point? And maybe not a breaking point, but what was it something that you saw in the culture of being in those spaces, or the smells and the sights and things like that, where you know, made you go, no, I'm good. I've had enough.
So the math problem of consistent smell of throw up of people ODing, or not, well, it's people being intoxicated and then possibly ODing. The smell of sweat and bodily fluids that just come through the pores, the visual sight of ecstasy, Xanax, and Molly in the pit area of the DJ section, and me just not really wanting to partake because I wanted to be sober during my DJ set so that I could be as focused as possible. The walking into a coffee shop one morning and somebody telling me that the geographical locations that you spend time in make up your progress in life, and me diving into that statement more, and then going back and experiencing those things again and disgust just because they didn't match what he said and what my goals were, and then reflection of looking at all the other decisions that I were currently making at that point in time and just having a period of exhaustion.
My favorite thing that you've said to me when we were having coffee, you said to me, you were like, a lot of the time people say time's the only thing you can't get back. You said no one ever says time and energy, and that's something that was very profound for me, because now I don't even look at the places that I'm around the same anymore, because wherever I am is either going to feed me or it's going to make me hungry, or sick. Those are really three options.
Yeah.
Feed me, take away from me, or make me sick.
Yeah.
So being in that environment where you are surrounded by things and blessed enough to already have that mental capacity of, okay, I will not do this.
Right.
I've set a promise to myself that I need to maintain. Of the things around me, I'm not going to partake in, because as a DJ, I want to be sober. So it sounded like from the beginning, even though you might not have been at the right place, something in you was just like, I'm not going to do that. That's not something I'm going to fall into. Do you think that being in that space would have drained more of that good, strong mentality out? Or do you think you just would have been even more exhausted but still kept that? Because a lot of the time I've heard people say that all humans should never say, I won't do something. I kind of disagree with it a little bit, because I'm like, well, I know there's things that I probably wouldn't do. Do you feel like staying in that environment would have made you question, like, man, yeah, I feel bad anyway, so let me just go ahead and do something that would, which is hard to say because you never got there. But
it is hard to say. I think it is very hard to say because I never got there. I think that if I would have never made the decision to move or shape or shift at that point in time, I would have eventually regretted not doing it, only because now a lot of the times I look at life and I do have the question of, if I would have started this career sooner or these endeavors sooner, how much further would I have been? That is the one question that I ask myself a lot. But then I ask myself in response to asking myself that question, would it really have mattered, because I wouldn't have treated it with as much reverence and respect as I do now? So, I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I don't really know. I do know that I'm grateful and unfortunate that I was aware enough and had enough, I'm gonna say, had enough home training to decide that as much as I was in a world where people used drugs and drank alcohol and did all those things under the sun with DJing, I had enough fortitude to continue to deny that action and say no so many times. I mean, there are times that I did things that I shouldn't have done,
Right.
but I had enough decision making to say no so much. So that's what I'm grateful for.
I love that. So to do this shift in your career to go from DJ and at one point licensed chemical dependency counselor,
Yeah.
you know, me personally knowing
I didn't
you
make
now,
that decision, by the way.
Tell me.
I didn't make that
Tell me
decision
how that
at all.
decision came
Bro,
about.
I
That's a crazy switch. Like, you got to tell me, like,
Yeah. No, I came home and found a church, and my pastor, who became my mentor, started that conversation with me, and I was like, ah. And then my mom started the same conversation with me, and I was like, ah. And then eventually, I gave in to my eyes, because my mom reflected on a time when I was younger, and I always loved watching, like, you remember those shows, Intervention, that they used to always
oh
have?
yeah, A&E.
They showed.
Channel 27.
Yeah, I used to love those, because I used to always love the classifications of whatever substance use disorder, right? It's like, oh, amphetamine use disorder, and Xanax, and analgesics, blah, blah, blah. And I used to always love that science of how you got there, and all of the symptoms of. And so my mom made that connection with me, and so I went, because my mom was always somebody who I respected, and her energy and her decision making. So I didn't want to, no energy, like none of that at all. I was okay with it because I liked the science behind it. I was okay with it because the education is something that I admired.
Yeah.
Did I want to? No.
Yeah.
And then I spent 2 years going to TJC and did that. Came out, and then the first job that I got was doing substance abuse work in the prison system in Henderson, Texas. Did that for a couple of years. But yeah, no, that's what happened. That wasn't a me thing at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So knowing you now, I can say you're very mindful about how the mind and the body isn't necessarily two separate units, right? Everything seems to flow into one.
Yeah.
Great book called The Body Keeps the Score.
Sure.
That's a phenomenal book.
Sure, my wife talks about it.
So, being in a place where there's a lot of systemized, here's how things should be done, especially in rehabs and things like that, did you ever feel that you were kind of at odds with systematic approaches?
Have we talked about that?
I think we've talked about it like a little bit,
Yeah,
but like
okay.
I know that you probably weren't 100% on board with everything, but that's to the extent that I know. Like I don't know anything beyond it.
So I was 100% on board with all of the therapeutic perspectives that exist. I will say that I have to make up my mind whether I want to say this or not. And my mind just shifted to a yes, I'm gonna do it.
I'm gonna set up for this.
Yeah.
I gotta give you some respect.
I will say that every place that I worked at was not in agreeing on my approach to counsel. You know, like my favorite word, like you and I have shared crinometrophobia. They hated when I talked about crinometrophobia.
Yeah.
And then like all of my clients and all of my peers' clients, when I did the whole group on crinometrophobia, which is essentially what you've already addressed, is time is not the only game, but energy as well, right? It's just a deep way of perspectively looking at it. And every single time I would talk about it, I would have clients coming out and asking their primary counsel, Miss So-and-so, do you know how to spell crinometrophobia? And so they would be like, okay, so he's talking about time again, and crinometrophobia. Yeah.
They didn't appreciate you bringing something, a word that they didn't know, you know.
I will say, and it wasn't even just that. I also think my confidence was always just a little bit off feeling. I'll tell you another story. So me and my program manager in Lufkin, Texas are still really cool. Like, that is my friend. We talk randomly. Like, when I got married, she wasn't able to make the wedding. I sent her pictures of all my wedding stuff, right? And it was just fantastic, and we talked about that. But when we talked like an hour or so, right?
Yeah.
And so I gave her one of my coffee mugs, you know, with my face on it, the older one with my face on it.
Yeah.
The newer second gen one's got like 2/3 of my body on it. Unfortunately, the next one will not have any portion of my anatomy on it. It'll just have the new. It looks like this. This is the 2/3 of my body.
That's what's up.
Yeah, it looks like that one, right? So, yeah. She said that one of her coworkers came in the office that knew me when I used to work there, and she said, "Oh yeah, they got Casey. He was always so full of himself." And she was like, "You stop there. Casey does this, that, and blah blah blah. You're not going to disrespect Casey in front of me." So, yeah, shout out to her, man. She's super cool.
Yeah. How dare you be confident in yourself? You know.
You know, the world.
How dare you?
The world advocates for you not being like, we will tell you in all mental health reverence, be confident, but we don't like the spirit of confidence. Like, it makes us so uncomfortable sometimes when
we don't like things that make us that require us to think about why we're not a certain way.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah. Sure.
We'd rather just remain the same, not grow.
Yeah, man.
I have so many things. I'm so curious. So, in your journey, I mean, you've discovered healing through drumming. Yeah, actually, did we get to the? Okay, hold on. Before I even get to that, I wanna expand on the counseling section of things, the licensed counseling counselor.
Sure.
And the transition out of that.
Sure.
Again, energy expenditure. But in this case, you know, you're working in a place where things you're saying aren't really being accepted, but you're doing what you do for the sake of serving other people, which we've talked about is a very important thing in this life. So my question is, what did the transition out of that look like, and were you battling trying to get that balance of the energy that had to take out of you, and also the fact that you're giving, because giving is an act that expends some energy, but it's your choice, right? So at that point, would you say that you were pretty conscious enough to keep that balance of giving to those people while not completely draining yourself in that process?
I think there's like 3 questions in that.
Yeah. Let me break them down.
Can you nail down the 3 questions or so?
Yes. Number 1, in giving to these people with everything going on, were you at a point where you were healthy enough to balance giving while energy's being taken out of you? And I guess the real question is, at what point where you're like, okay, I've given all I can in this area without taking more of the energy that I need to function?
Yeah. So, for clarity, are you asking me when the season of substance use counseling ended?
Yes. And the follow-up question would be, tell me the transition out of that.
So I have to tell you about the conversations that I was having with God about 6 months prior to that, or maybe 4 months prior to that, when I wanted to do drumming and counseling and therapy and education full time. So I was constantly having conversations with God about what it looked like to do that full time and not do substance abuse counseling at all, right? And just live by my drum, right? And at some point of having those conversations, God told me, it's time. You can leave. You need to leave. It's time. And I was like, I feel like I just need this. I feel like I just need like another 1 more contract or 2 more contracts or blah, 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 right? And eventually, in the month of July of 2023, when all the chips had were presented and all the ships were there, right? And at that point, I had lived in substance abuse work for 8 years. Right? So from 2000, I think 8 years. So from 2000, maybe 10, I don't remember. 2000, like late 2014 or early 2014 to then, right? And I got fired. That's what happened. I got fired because there was a bunch of transition of management, and in the transition of management, somebody decided that it was a great idea to get rid of the counselor that made us feel uncomfortable.
They lost Casey Muse. That's crazy to me.
So
wow.
Yeah, so they put me on suspension, and after my, I think 3 days plus like 2 of the weekend days or whatever, so 5 days of suspension. That's what happened.
Yeah.
And yeah, but what happened is this in response is, prior to that, God had equipped me with resources that allowed me to get through the timing. I was blessed with a great friendships that supported me in all of the health spaces, mental health, physical health, all the things, right? And went through my short period of mental health chaos and crisis at that period. And God presented me with the opportunity to not have to go look for employment, but pursue Avenue Speak LLC, which is all of the therapeutic processes of drumming, the mentorship, as well as the writing workshops, and then add CaseyMuse.com on top of it later on, which is all of these public speaking endeavors that I speak about, all of the physiological healing components of bilateral this and that, and executive functioning, and amygdala, and neuroplasticity, and all of those things get spoken about in these live seminars, and I love. So now, like, no shade, truth, now I simply live freely playing drums, and it's fantastic. Yeah.
And to anybody that doesn't know, this man will be the first to show you that drumming is not just something to write off, or just something like, oh, it's just something, to pass time. And it could be a way to pass time, and it can be a hobby. But what you'll learn is it's so much deeper than you think. It's a beautiful thing. Which actually kind of segues into my next question. Let's see if I can find it right here. You discovered healing through drumming, but yet there must have been some moments in life of silence that felt overwhelming. Has silence ever taught you anything about yourself that rhythm couldn't?
No. I think even for me, even when there's silence, there's rhythm. Like the waves crash, like the water behind us, right? Like even when there's silence, there's still noise, right? We know this as musicians, with the silence, but then the gray noise and the white noise and the pink noise, and right, all of the static that exists. I think even when there's silence, whether intentional or, in fact, well, I know, even when there's silence, whether it's intentional silence or unintentional silence, that silence is put there to allow you to identify frequencies and cadences and rhythms and patterns that you would not normally have noticed without your silence. And if you can understand the purpose of intentional silence, it gets deeper. So, no.
Even in the world's most quiet room. Is this the doggo?
This is my honey. This is my 17-year-old elder baby.
Up?
Hey, baby.
Come here.
You can come here.
We have been blessed. Well, how do you know what's there? Come on now.
Honey, this is another Casey.
Hey, phone. 17 years old. stay in there for longer than a certain period of time, I mean, it's just minutes, you start hearing the functions of your own body.
Yeah.
You start hearing your heart. You hear this idea of, and which is a good point, is this idea of silence. It's not real, is it? There's always something going on.
Yeah.
There's the absence of other noise, maybe, or different types of noise, but do we ever hear silence truly?
No, so I love the biblical reference of stillness as opposed to silence.
Yeah.
Right? Stillness is great. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see much. Now that you think about it, I've seen more stillness in the Bible than I have seen silence. Is that a thing? I gotta look up like a word counter. If there's anybody that watches this and has like a biblical word counter, like look up stillness and silence to see.
Well, that's kind of like, how many times is happy really in the Bible?
Yeah.
What versus joy? Because joy is so advocated for. The Bible doesn't talk about happiness.
Yeah.
In fact, no biblical reference or no spiritual reference or context talks about the word happiness.
Yeah.
Or happy. Like, happiness is a thing where it's predicated off of something having to happen to you or somebody having happened.
Yeah.
Joy is, I'm good either way.
Yeah. I think about when people say, "Oh, I'm happy for you." It's like,
Sure.
how
Oh,
surface
bless your
level does that?
heart.
Yeah, bless your heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw this thing where it said,
Yeah.
"Too long, didn't read. I'm happy for you though," or "Sorry that happened."
Right.
And I was like, "Yeah, I'm
Too long.
happy for you."
Too long, didn't read.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
That's a person that you don't need to have in your life.
No, not at all. What's a question you wish more people ask their counselors but rarely do?
Dang. I don't think there is one. Because if the presence were of the cognitive development for them to ask a question that I could formulate to answer your question, they may be able to path their own journey to where counseling is not an absolute must. I don't think there's not one.
Oh, which raises a great question. What would you say are the criteria of somebody considering counseling as an absolute must?
Okay.
That's a hard one.
So an absolute must is even an opinionated statement. In truth, I think any and everybody should go to counseling to some degree. Right. And I'm not gonna sit here and list off specifics of what type of counselor or what your current standings may be that allow you to qualify going to counseling, because I think that's a question that goes pretty deep and pretty broad, and there's a lot of dynamics in that conversation. And if I start that conversation, I'm gonna get myself in trouble because I'm gonna start lying, because there's a lot of variations of opinions.
Yeah.
But yeah. But no, go to counseling.
Yeah.
Just go.
I like that you don't have an answer for that. And the way you just communicate, I think, shows how much you truly care for people. You know, I mean, you could have lied. You could have said a very surface level statement. You could have gone for easy to reach things. Well, you know, if they're doing this or if they're doing that, and you didn't.
Yeah.
Because you recognize the complexity of somebody.
Right.
And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Have to.
What do you think about, like, I just realize I'm trying not to formulate questions in that way that get you in trouble.
I mean, I won't
Edit that
answer
out. Yeah. Do you think that there's any difference in somebody being able to give help via like a Zoom call versus being in person?
No. I mean, different, yes, because the amount of attention that a person has to pay to presume is very specific and almost learned by that person. if the question was, do I think the level changes of the ability of a person to receive consultation that's good over Zoom or in person? No. No. A lot of times it also has a lot to do with how willing the person receiving consultation is willing to listen and internalize and seek consultation. Right? So, yeah, and a lot of counseling is that. It's like, how willing are you to participate in counseling, as well as the person being willing to allow you to receive the right counseling that's given to you.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked about moments in life where we need to graduate from a space.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person that's in counseling and they're like, man, I just don't know if I have the right counselor. Something doesn't feel right.
Sure.
Would you say that? How could they evaluate? Is this me, or do I need to actually see somebody different? Is this just not the right person for me, even if they're a great counselor?
There's a lot of variations to that question.
Yeah,
there really are.
It's hard to ask
Yeah.
general questions to very specific incidents.
Yeah, no, I can't even answer that question, because it's also very specific to each individual person.
Absolutely.
But also the individual counselor as well, right? Like, I mean, I'm not everybody's counselor either, right? Like, my wife is not everybody's counselor either, right? What I will say is this: is if your counselor, good counselors will always recognize and refer out to people that they're not benefiting, if they can. Sometimes they can't, because if they work for somebody else, sometimes that is what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
But just depending.
Something I was thinking about on my drive up here is that oftentimes in life, this may be a bit of a subject change, but oftentimes in life, I find that we have a tendency to deny something that's clearly right in front of us, only to listen to somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about, like you said, that learned from somebody who didn't know what they were talking about, who learned from somebody who didn't know. So now we have apostolic succession of people who don't know a thing. So,
and the ignorance is advocated.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why is it easier to take what somebody says at face value than to actually just look at something that's happening in front of you?
It's comfortable, man. It's easy and it's comfortable. That's it. No. I don't ask myself that question, because that question is, the answer to that question will always be the same, and it's always circumstantial to what your comfort space is. Not comfort level, but comfort space. And if it's comfortable for you to hear something, like, if I hear over and over again in life that it's easy to shoot my 3-point jump shot with full extension, right?
Yeah.
And I've done it for years and years and years. I'm gonna do that jump shot for years and years and years. And then if somebody comes up to me and says, nah, man, quick release is good, and you can still get there, and blah, 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 blah. Making that transition is weird.
Yeah.
I mean, I may try to commit to shifting, but then there's still that conflict in that fight, right? And then to leave that foundation, it's just so out of pocket sometimes, right?
It's almost like you have 3 categories of people. You have people that are comfortable and are okay with whatever awful situation comfort brings them. You have people who are past that, who decide, maybe I will not be comfortable in this moment and get past it. And then you have the worst, which is right in the middle, where you're scared of complacency, but don't do anything about
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, people vary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Complexity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess as I'm asking, I'm starting to realize, man, like,
Yeah. No, what you're
to treat
describing.
everybody like an individual.
Yeah, what you're describing, dude, is a very. It's not even. It's just like gray area to the max, and it's very much you have to meet everybody where they're at. Like like the overall code in counseling is meet them where they're at, and you can't effectively give anybody consultation if you're not willing to and able to meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
If you're not able to do that, you shouldn't.
In The Body Keeps the Score, there was a moment where they're like, Greg suffers from this in his daily life, and he has patterns like this, and the author of the book, along with some other students, were like, oh, he's got OCD. No, he has ADHD. No, that aligns with this. So they finally asked the professor. It's like, does Greg have OCD, ADHD? Which one? You know, is Greg OCD or ADHD? I think was the ultimate question. What do we call it? What do we call it, Professor Guys? I think we called it Greg.
Yeah.
That's a pretty profound statement. Because even
Yeah.
though he may actually have those things, he was teaching his students, you have to treat this as an individual before you actually diagnose it.
Yeah.
Not that he didn't have any of those, because he probably did have those, and they probably hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. I also. Yeah, man. I also think that the idea of labeling for mental health disorders, substance abuse disorders, neurodivergencies, I think sometimes there gets to be this idea that they have to have that label. They have to have this bracket of, before we can even help them or assist them any further, they have to have that, which I understand that we think that. That doesn't mean that that allows you to treat that person wholeheartedly, because what happens is you get to focusing on the symptoms of OCD or symptoms of ADD, and like, well, what if it doesn't match up with their actions and their resiliency, right? So sometimes I know a lot of therapists and a lot of counselors, and I'm one of them. We're not diagnosing anything. We want to treat you. We want to treat you as a person.
Say it again.
So I don't diagnose. I know several other therapists that don't diagnose. Now, I'm not saying anything slanderous or malice about counselors or therapists that do.
Right.
I just don't do that.
That's awesome. I hope that definitely brings comfort to me to hear, that there are counselors that are willing to take that approach. What would you say to anybody that is not anti-counseling, but already has a distrust in things like their doctor, and things that maybe they've been wronged even in medical practices, so when it comes to the emotional side of things, they're probably even more a little hesitant? What would you say to the people who are hesitant about getting counseling and might need it?
Go to counseling.
Yeah.
Just go. I mean, I could open up the box and say specific things, but even that's dangerous, because that's like it would be like telling somebody to go to Google and search skin wart disorder if you've got a rash.
Yeah.
But you don't have skin wart disorder, which is not a thing. I'm just making this up as an example.
Yeah. But if you find it, don't name it after him.
Don't do that.
Please.
Yeah, don't do that.
Please.
But then you're looking up all of the negative or least undesirable things, and that's all you see. So yeah, man, I'm not gonna. That conversation gets hairy.
Yeah.
Specifically, I could tell you to look at your relationship with your mother and your father, but specifically, go to counseling.
Yeah. I love that. That's one of my favorite things about you is is even with some questions that I've asked, which are very generalized or gray area or surface level, you don't cater to that. And I think that's an awesome thing, because it just goes to show it's like it doesn't matter how I appear in this moment. Like, I don't care. I know that the truth is always going to appear as the truth, and in turn benefits everybody, right? Like, I don't have to engage with things that are ultimately not going to be helpful for other people.
Yeah.
That's respectable. I like that a lot. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
I think that the most ingenuine relationships look so strangely happy on the surface. I was watching somebody that I know, who I have a lot of love for, but I just thought to myself, how is this person's? I was looking at their closest relationships, and I was just thinking, I was like, I've never seen this person be genuine with everybody, and everybody that's with them, they look so happy, and I want them to be happy, or I want them to experience joy in those relationships, but I just can't help but look into that, and I'm just like, man, if they're happy all the time, and there's not once a moment of discomfort, that can't be good. I got a trainer up at my gym who says, I don't want to be sad all the time, but I don't necessarily want to be like, whoo. He said, I like to live somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty interesting place to be. Now, I have to ask, who are the best superheroes, and why is the answer Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? Who's your favorite turtle and why?
I'm biased as hell. I just like Ninja Turtles. I grew up with them. I love them. It's part of, like, I just really enjoy them.
Yeah.
There's no other answer to that question, but that's who I like.
Yeah.
So, I mean, them over Spider-Man, over Batman, and I love Batman. Like, I do. That Batman will be a close second or a close fifth.
Yeah, there you go.
Or a close sixth, because if I want to get really crazy, I'm going to throw Master Splinter in there in the Turtle Saga. So, maybe a good sixth is Batman. I don't really know. My order of my favorite to least favorite, and this ebb and flow, the top two ebb and flow, and then the top 3 and 4 ebb and flow. Top 1 and 2, Michelangelo, Donatello, orange and blue, or orange and purple, right? Leonardo and Raphael, 3 and 4, ebb and flow, just shift. Yeah.
Give us some
Yeah.
fluctuation.
Yeah, no, I just love it. And it doesn't matter how many new movies they come out with Ninja Turtles. It doesn't matter how bad it is. I still like it.
There you go.
It doesn't matter. Even the one with the newer one that just came out like a year ago with Black April O'Neil, like the one is like for real in Brooklyn, New York. That's like kind of halfway black as hell because they've got like a hip hop soundtrack and shit. I like it. Some people say it's trash. I don't care. I'm not gonna have that conversation with you.
Like, they're not on my level. We don't. They're not about what I'm about.
It's not even a level thing. It's just the fact that I love, like, my love and enduring respect for Ninja Turtles. Like, it's a deep thing. It's like a deep cut thing for me, right?
Yeah.
I love them enough to write a whole entire blog about them.
Oh, there you go.
Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
Recently I wrote a whole entire blog about them on my. Yeah, I think I actually did that the same day I sent you that information. Or maybe like the day after or something.
That's awesome.
Because I was inspired. I was like, I'm gonna write this blog.
Well, you gotta be.
Yeah.
You gotta have.
Yeah. Nah, man, Ninja Turtles all day. That's what it is.
All right, be honest. What's an overrated drumming technique people hype up too much?
That doesn't exist. Nah, that doesn't exist. Nah, man. It doesn't exist. Flams are cool. Paradiddles are cool. Double paradiddles are cool. Yeah, no. Nah, man. Doesn't exist.
There you go. All right, back to something serious. So if you had to give an answer for this one, right? Because I know God has guided your purpose
Sure.
and has guided you through, and you clearly have. I don't even like using the word called for, because there's almost an aspect where if people talk about me, they're like, "Oh, he was called to be a musician." Well,
Okay.
it's a strange term, because for me,
Maybe.
it's like we could use the word call, but I think that was how I was made. And I think there's a difference between called. Called almost insinuates like you were already here, and then something happened. And maybe that's wrong. That's how it feels.
Okay.
It's almost like in a sense, being leads to doing, which leads to having. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't even know how true that is.
It's very true.
You know?
It's very true.
But that's how I feel. Where it's like
It's true with expectation that being in the wrong place leads to doing the wrong thing, leads to having the wrong things.
oh, say it again.
But also,
Say it again.
I can't.
That was nice. Replay that.
Being in the wrong place leads to doing the wrong things, leads to having the wrong objects. I think I said it slightly.
No, that was good.
Yeah,
I
but
like
then
that.
also paying respect to the opposite side of the coin, being in the right place leads to doing the right things, leads to having the right?
Yeah,
You gotta look at both sides.
that was nice.
Yeah.
I like that. It had flow to it.
Yeah.
There's a rhythm behind that.
Right, a cadence, if you will.
A cadence.
Yeah.
Well, the question.
Yeah, but you also, it was off the top of the dome.
It was
right?
nice.
Yeah.
It was nice. That producer brain coming back out. You're like,
Baby,
that
it ain't never left.
it ain't
It
never
ain't
left.
never left.
Well, then, okay, if drumming was taken away, and you got to give an answer. Not that it ever would.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
It's gonna be a tough one.
Yeah.
If suppose you had never even found music. Suppose you're one of those people, and I don't understand these people, but there are people in this world who are like, hey man, what music you listen to? He's like, I don't really listen to music. I don't understand it. See that?
See that? Even without music, I'm like listening to silence and all the background noise in the silence and making things out of like gray noise, and so that's difficult.
Well, the question is, if you took all that away, the
Sure.
drumming and the music, what do you think would be your avenue for healing?
First I'm gonna tell you where I thought this question was gonna go and where my mind was prepping the answers for.
I just like threw you a curve.
First, I thought you were gonna go, what profession do you think you would be if drumming never happened? I was gonna say a DJ.
Yeah.
Threw that out the window. Then I thought you were gonna say, what profession would you be in if music never were a thing? I was gonna say architect. Threw that out the window. Then you threw me a curve when you said, what modality of healing would be present without music? What?